Dr. Katherine Poole.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for that lovely introduction, and thank you very much for having me here today to speak. What we do today is look at some ideals of beauty, some standards of beauty in Renaissance Italy, which happens to be my area of focus. And also, I'm very interested in issues of gender and women in art. In fact, that's one of my favorite classes to teach, and was the class that made me become an art history major in the first place. The ideal qualities, features that a Renaissance woman should have to be considered beautiful. And one of the people that looms very large is Petrarch. I wrote a couple names over on the board up there. Petrarch's at the top. It may be a little hard to see. But Petrarch, who is the 14th century poet, wrote a lot of love poetry, and particularly poetry that was devoted to his beloved Laura, who was considered to be the be-all and end-all of women. And what Petrarch writes about Laura, and he never actually writes a whole poem where he says, and here are all of the things that are so fabulous about Laura, and everybody should try to emulate this. But what happens is writers after him really codify all of these different qualities. They kind of pick through all of his poems and find them and kind of assemble them all together. Although to their great dismay, Petrarch seems to have totally ignored Laura's nose. So there's a lot of upset during the Renaissance, but they don't know what Petrarch would have thought was the ideal nose, right? So, again, to give you a sense, right, of what Petrarch thought were some of the ideal qualities. We have a couple of portraits here, and you may be able to tell me, because these are all modeled after sort of this Petrarchan ideal of beauty. So when we see these three women all together, what are some features that we see right off the bat that they seem to have in common, or that we might say, hey, I'm starting to see what beauty might be to a 15th century audience? Long neck, yeah, super long neck. And that is one thing that Petrarch talks about, very, very long neck. Yeah, and very emphasized, right? And we see also, these are all in profile, right? The early convention for both men and women is in profile, right? And that comes from classical antiquity, from medals, right? But what we see is women stay in profile a lot longer, right, than men do. Men turn to the front and women stay to the side. Part of that is, well, you could much better see that long, gorgeous neck when they're to the side, right, to a certain extent. What else do we notice that we would see they have in common? They're all white. Well, you know what? It is Renaissance Italy, after all, right? But joking aside, right, but they're all really pale white, this very, skin like snow, skin like milk, right? What else do we see?
High forehead.
Super high forehead. Everybody has these plucked back foreheads. And in fact, they would pluck them back. They would sort of shave them back. And you see them pulling, the hair gets pulled so tight to emphasize that, right? What else do we see?
Thin lips.
Relatively thin lips. Yeah, we don't see a lot of Botox-looking lips, do we? Yeah, but they're always lips are supposed to be like rubies, right? Teeth like pearls. Although, you never see the teeth, right? The idea is that, teeth are like pearls, but we're never going to know, right, because they're not smart. But ideally, that's what they should look like, right? What else do we notice? How is their hair?
Blonde.
Everybody's blonde, right? And that was something else. Petrarch spends a lot of time talking about hair, long blonde hair, right? Gleaming like gold. And in fact, we know that some Renaissance women would even dye their hair to get that gold color, right? So all of them really fit into what Petrarch says. He also talks about, they have really fine eyebrows. They also fixate a lot on eyes, like dark, sparkling eyes, although in profile, it's a little bit hard to engage with the eyes, but that is something that the poets talk about a lot. Also firm breasts like apples, white as snow also is very popular. And, of course, though, they have to be good on the inside, too, right? So it's not just that, right? But in fact, so we look, here's three. I can give you three more. Right? That are all going to be very, very similar. That, and we look at them, and some of them we think, not sure I would necessarily say beautiful when I look at them, right? But it's beauty according to the standards of the time in terms of what they look like and also contemporary fashion. Because if we also notice something else that's going on with these ladies, everyone's got pretty exciting outfits on. There's a lot going on, really very elaborate costumes. They're wearing a lot of jewelry. They've got these elaborate headpieces, right? So it's also, clothing and jewelry are markers of status and wealth and sometimes of lineage, but also the clothing and the jewelry kind of enhances the beauty of the woman. So also kind of tied into making this the complete package. And again, obviously connected to marriage, this would be about, oh, it's so lovely. Look what she's bringing, all of this beauty, and then, we have wealth, we have status, right? And then, of course, the other features are not quite so secondary, which is, and she's going to be a great wife, she's going to be a great mother, very fertile, very, this one is good, right? So we also see things, for example, a lot of use of the pearls, symbols of chastity, of purity, because again, this idea of virtue being so important. And the one on the right, this is Filippo Lippi, and he is often credited as being the one that sort of really comes up with the first kind of model, and everyone kind of falls in line after that. So, again, you see a lot of consistency, and again, these are not portraits of individuals, right? These are types. These are reflections of larger social ideals and ideals specifically of beauty. Now, here are two of my favorites, right? Some that you might know. This one on the right you might know very well. And this is Giovanna Tornabuoni. Now, you can see there starts to be a little bit of room to move in some of these ideals of beauty. She's not entirely blonde anymore. We start to see later in the 15th century, they're allowed to keep their own hair color, right? But again, we see her in incredibly elaborate dress. In fact, we probably pay more attention to that dress than we do to her, right? And in fact, I love it. So she's got all this stuff woven in. She actually has an L woven into her shoulder. That's her husband, right? So she's branded, right? Lorenzo, this is his. Right? And so, we see that. We see the jewelry. We also see the fact she's got a book back here. We're going to assume maybe it's a Bible, and she's pious, right? So all this, again, the ideal woman. And in fact, we think that this was probably commissioned after she had died. Maybe marriage, maybe after she died in childbirth. So, again, it was like, well, she did her duty, though. She was done, now we did. Like, the best thing she could do, right? So here, I love this one. It's another Filippo Lippi. Because what we see here, what we start to notice a little bit, there's maybe some gender differences going on with men and women. It's sort of poster. We'll see that again in a moment. But I love this one, right? Again, woman very similarly to how we have seen her. Right? I love my husband peeking in, like, oh, honey, how's it going inside, on the inside world, right? And he's in fact holding the emblem of his family, and she has actually embroidered into her sleeve the Italian word for loyalty. Right? So, again, and you can see these sloping, these like foreheads that are just defy natural anatomy. But again, the Lippi is always a good one to bring up because he really does kind of establish this type, and you see that it endures.